I didn't think much of the new house at first. It was just supposed to be a temporary place for my parents after they downsized. They had spent years talking about moving somewhere smaller, somewhere easier to maintain now that I was gone for college. When they finally did it, I only visited the place a few times. It was an older home on the edge of a quiet suburb in northern Georgia. Nothing about it stood out at first glance. A bit worn down, a bit too quiet, but still normal enough. When I first came by, my parents gave me the usual walkthrough. Kitchen, living room, bedrooms. Then my dad mentioned something that stuck in my head for no real reason. "There's no basement," he said. "Just a crawl space under the house. Nothing down there worth worrying about." My mom agreed. They said it like it was a fact that didn't need a second thought. I didn't question it. For a while, nothing strange happened. I only stayed over when I was visiting from college, maybe a night or two at most. The house always felt still, almost too still, but I assumed that was just what older homes felt like when you weren't used to them. Then came the first night everything changed. It was midweek. I had come home late after helping a friend move, and I crashed in the guest room on the ground floor. I remember how quiet the house was when I lay down. Not the peaceful kind of quiet either. It felt dense, like the air itself was holding still. I was just drifting off when I heard it. A sound under the floor. At first, it was subtle, like tapping. Slow and steady, almost rhythmic. I assumed it was pipes or maybe the heater kicking in. Old houses make weird noises all the time, and I tried to ignore it. But then it didn't stop. The tapping continued, always coming from below me. Not from the walls, not from outside, directly underneath the room. I sat up in bed and listened. The sound wasn't random either. It had structure, almost like something was trying to communicate in a pattern. I got up and stood in the middle of the room trying to pinpoint it. The floor creaked beneath me, but the tapping stayed consistent. It followed no pattern I could understand, but it also didn't feel like chance. That's what made it worse. I told myself it had to be the crawl space. Maybe an animal got in there. Raccoons, stray cats, something like that. But even as I thought it, I knew it didn't fully make sense. The sound felt too deliberate for that. Eventually, it stopped. The sudden silence was worse than the noise itself. I stayed awake for another hour before finally falling asleep out of exhaustion. The next morning, I tried to forget about it. I told myself it was just a one-time thing. Old house, weird acoustics, nothing more. But the second night proved me wrong. It started again at almost the exact same time. Only this time it was louder. The tapping had weight behind it now, more forceful, less random. I remember sitting up in bed and feeling my stomach tighten because it didn't feel like something outside the house anymore. It felt like it was inside it. I didn't go back to sleep right away. I just lay there listening, trying to rationalize it. Pipes expanding, wind, animals under the floor, anything that made sense. But none of it did. And then it changed again on the third night. The tapping came back, but it wasn't alone this time. There was dragging, scraping, like something heavy was being pulled across wood or dirt directly beneath me. Slow, uneven movements followed by sudden stops. It sounded almost like something was searching for a way through. That's the night I finally told my parents. My dad didn't take it seriously at first. He said it was probably animals in the crawl space and suggested we check it out in the morning. I didn't argue, but I already knew I wasn't going to like what we found down there. The crawl space entrance was outside, near the side of the house, under a small wooden panel. I remember crouching down with a flashlight while my dad pulled it open. The air that came out wasn't fresh, but it wasn't unusual either. Just damp, like most crawl spaces. We checked everything we could see. Nothing. No signs of animals, no nests, no movement. Just empty space and dirt. My dad shrugged it off and said it was probably settling wood or pipes. He looked satisfied with that explanation. I wasn't, because I knew what I had heard, and wood doesn't tap in patterns. That night, I couldn't let it go. After everyone went to bed, I stayed up trying to figure it out. I walked around the house again, listening, waiting. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Near the side of the house, behind some old construction materials stacked against the wall, there was something hidden. A door. Not a crawlspace panel, a real door. Old, weathered, partially painted over like it hadn't been touched in years. It blended so well into the wall that I almost missed it entirely. I stood there for a long time before touching it, and when I finally pulled it open, I saw something my parents never mentioned at all. A staircase going down, and it wasn't a crawl space under the house. It was a basement. The moment I saw the stairs going down, I just stood there, holding the door open, not moving. It didn't make sense. My parents had been absolutely certain there was no basement. They didn't just say it once, either. They repeated it like it was a confirmed fact. But the concrete steps in front of me said otherwise. I should have walked away. I should have closed the door and told myself it was just an old storage space or something harmless. But there was a part of me that already knew that whatever was down there had been active recently. And that meant I wasn't the only one who didn't know about it. I went down. The air changed immediately as I stepped inside. It was colder, thicker, the kind of air that feels like it hasn't moved in a long time. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing bare concrete walls and support beams stretching into shadows. At first glance, it looked abandoned. Then I saw the details. Empty food containers scattered near one corner, bottles lined up like someone had been sitting there for long periods. A thin mattress pushed against the wall. Not new, not clean, used. Someone had been living there. I felt my stomach tighten as I moved further in. The basement wasn't large, but it wasn't small either. It had clearly been built with intention, not something accidental or forgotten. And then I saw the markings. On one of the main support beams, there were scratches carved into the wood, tall, uneven lines grouped together like tally marks. Some sections were deeper than others, like they had been made with different tools or different levels of pressure. Next to them were drawings. Not childish drawings, something worse. Rough sketches carved into the wood with violent strokes. Human figures, animals, but distorted in ways that didn't feel random. Deliberate exaggerations, long limbs, hollow shapes, faces that didn't look right. I didn't want to look at them too long, but I couldn't help it. Something about them felt like they were meant to be seen and remembered. That's when I heard a sound behind me. Not tapping this time, movement. I turned my flashlight quickly across the basement, but there was nothing immediately visible, just shadows and stacked objects. But I knew I hadn't imagined it. I backed up toward the stairs without taking my eyes off the room. Whatever had been down here wasn't here now, but it had been recently. I left without touching anything else. The second I got upstairs, I called my parents. My voice came out faster than I expected. I told them everything I saw, the basement, the markings, the signs someone had been living there. There was a long silence on the other end. Then my dad said something that made everything worse. He told me he had no idea there was a basement. Neither did my mom. At first, I thought they were lying, but they sounded genuinely confused. My dad even asked me multiple times if I was sure I wasn't mistaken. I wasn't. He said they would come back immediately from their trip, but that didn't calm me down, because the question that stuck in my head wasn't about the basement anymore. It was about who had been down there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I locked every door I could and kept checking the windows. Around midnight, I heard it again, the tapping. But now it wasn't below the house. It was outside. Fast, heavy banging against the side entrance where I had found the hidden door earlier. Not random, not natural. It sounded angry, persistent, like something trying to force its way back inside. I froze in the hallway listening. The banging stopped for a second. Then I heard dragging footsteps outside. And then silence. I slowly moved to the window and pulled the curtain just enough to look out. For a moment, I saw nothing. Then something moved across the yard. A figure. Not walking, running. Fast, low, disappearing into the dark trees behind the house, like it already knew the area better than I ever could. I didn't sleep after that. By morning, my parents had already cut their trip short. When they got home, the first thing they did was check the basement themselves. They came back up looking unsettled, but still insisting they had no explanation. The police were called later that day. They searched the basement thoroughly and found nothing. No person, no clear evidence of long-term occupation, just the same space I had seen. But I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. After that, things quieted down, but it never felt right again. My parents eventually installed locks on the hidden door, but even that didn't change the feeling that something had already figured out how to get in and out without needing permission. I left for college the next morning, and ever since then, I keep wondering the same thing. If the basement was never supposed to exist, then who was living there before I found it? It started with something so ordinary that I almost didn't even mention it to anyone afterward. A car on the side of a rural highway. I was driving to work early in the morning through a long stretch of road outside rural Montana. Nothing really changes out there. Fields, broken fences, and miles of empty asphalt where your thoughts drift further than they should. That morning, I noticed a light blue sedan parked on the shoulder. No hazard lights, no movement. Just sitting there, slightly angled toward the ditch like it had been abandoned mid-stop. As I got closer, I slowed down instinctively. You learn to do that in places like this. Anything out of place usually means someone needs help or something has gone wrong. But I didn't see anyone. Driver's seat empty. Passenger seat empty. Back seat too. The car looked unlocked, but nothing about it suggested urgency. No smashed windows, no obvious damage. Still, something about it bothered me. Not enough to stop, but enough to stick in my head longer than usual. I kept driving. By the time I reached work, I had already forgotten about it. Or so I thought. Because on the way back that evening, I saw it again. Same car, same exact spot. That alone made me slow down more than I did earlier. But this time, something was different. The driver's door was open, wide open, like someone had gotten out in a hurry and never returned. I stopped my truck a few yards ahead and looked back through the mirror, trying to make sense of it. There still wasn't anyone around. No movement in the fields, no signs of struggle. Just that empty car sitting under the fading daylight. I drove a bit farther, found a spot with reception, and called it in to a non-emergency line. I reported exactly what I saw, gave the location, and figured that would be the end of it. And for a while, it was. The next morning, the car was gone. I assumed police had taken it, or maybe the owner returned overnight. It wasn't unusual for things like that to get cleaned up quickly out there. But about a week later, I saw something on the local news that made me pause. A missing person case. A vehicle found abandoned along a rural highway outside town. They didn't show the exact car, but the details lined up too closely for it to be coincidence. Same stretch of road, same description, same general timeline. What they said next made it worse. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, no explanation. Just a vehicle that appeared and then a person who didn't. I sat there watching the report longer than I should have, replaying that moment in my head when I saw the open door. It started to feel less like I had just noticed something strange and more like I had stumbled into something I wasn't supposed to interrupt. Still, I couldn't let it go. A few days later, I mentioned it to my brother, Benjamin. He worked with the local fire department, and sometimes they heard things before the public did. He confirmed there had been a coordinated response, search efforts, law enforcement involvement, the usual procedure. But he also said something odd. The case wasn't getting much attention internally anymore. like it had already started fading out of priority. That didn't sit right with me, so I asked him if I could join any search efforts if they happened again. He didn't really understand why I was so invested, but eventually he agreed to bring it up. A few days later, I got a call. They were organizing a search near the original location, not a full-scale operation, but a small coordinated sweep through surrounding terrain. I joined without hesitation. Something about that abandoned car kept pulling me back, even though I couldn't explain why. And that's when the search started to feel like it was leading somewhere no one expected. We started the search just after sunrise. The area was rough terrain, the kind of place where the highway disappears into uneven ground, shallow ditches, and patches of dense brush that hide more than they reveal. On paper, it didn't look like much. In person, it felt bigger, more confusing, easy to get turned around if you weren't paying attention. I stayed with Benjamin most of the time, moving through low grass and scattered trees while others spread out in pairs. Every so often, someone would radio in with nothing unusual. Just silence, mostly. The kind of silence that starts to feel heavy after a while. About an hour in, one of the teams called it in. They'd found something. We all moved toward their position, pushing through thicker brush until the landscape shifted slightly. That's when I saw it. An old maintenance shack. Half hidden, half swallowed by vegetation, like it had been left alone long enough for the land to start reclaiming it. From the road, you would never notice it. Even standing a few meters away, it still felt easy to miss unless you knew exactly where to look. The door was partially open. Not forced wide open, just hanging there slightly, enough to suggest it hadn't been sealed properly in a long time. But when we got closer, that assumption started to fall apart. The lock on the door had been snapped. Not weather damage, not age, broken cleanly. Inside, the air was stale and damp. It smelled like old wood and long-term neglect. But it didn't feel completely abandoned. There were small signs that changed everything. Empty water bottles, food wrappers, items placed in ways that didn't look accidental. Someone had been here recently. The group spread out, checking corners, scanning the floor, looking for anything useful. I stayed near the entrance at first, trying to process how a place like this could stay unnoticed so close to a main road. Then one of the firefighters called out. He'd found something along the back wall. We all moved toward their position, gathering there. On one of the wooden panels, there was a small hole. Too clean to be random damage, too precise to be natural decay. It looked deliberate, like something had gone through it with force. No casing, no blood, no additional markings nearby. Just that single point of impact staring back at us from the wall. The atmosphere shifted immediately. This wasn't just an abandoned structure anymore. This was something that had been involved in something else. The lead officer stepped in, took photos, radioed the details, and after a short exchange on the line, his expression changed. He wasn't sharing everything he was hearing, but it was clear the tone of the situation had shifted. We were told to step back. Then we were told something more direct. The civilian participants were no longer needed. That included me. I didn't argue, but I remember how it felt walking away from that shack. Like I had been pulled right up to something important and then cut off before I could see what it actually was. Benjamin stayed behind a little longer, but even he was cleared out soon after. After that day, everything went quiet. No updates, no follow-up reports, no mention of what was actually found inside beyond what we already saw. It was like the entire thing had been sealed off and pushed out of public awareness. I tried going back weeks later. I wanted to see the shack again, confirm it hadn't just been my imagination filling in gaps. I drove the same route, parked where the search had started, and walked the area for hours, but I couldn't find it. No trail, no structure, no sign that anything had ever been there at all. At first, I thought I had simply missed it, that maybe I was off by a few meters, a few turns. But the more I searched, the more impossible it became to reconcile what I remembered with what I was seeing. It was like the land had reset itself. Eventually, I had to leave. But even now, I can't fully explain what stays with me from that case. It's not just the abandoned car or the missing person report. It's the feeling that something was interrupted mid-process, and whatever it was, we only ever saw the edges of it. And somehow, the part that mattered most was the one thing no one was allowed to understand.